The queen burst into her daughter's chambers, waving a message that had just arrived from Burgos. She exclaimed triumphantly, "He's acknowledged you and appointed you his heir. You'll be the queen." The intended recipient of these words slowly looked up from her reading, unimpressed by her mother's excited demeanor. "He'll disown me again if it suits him," the girl replied seriously, "just like he's done before." "He dare not," her mother countered. "He knows I'll stop at nothing to put you on the throne, and he's too cowardly." The girl, who had been officially recognized as the Infanta of Castile by a special decree, was named Juana. Born in the mid-15th century, she was the only daughter of King Enrique IV and Juana of Portugal. Her birth was a surprise to many, as the King of Castile had shown little interest in women for a long time. This monarch was known for his indecisiveness. All his decisions were made by his favorite, Juan Pacheco. Rumors circulated that there was an intimate relationship between Enrique IV and his chief advisor, although there was no direct evidence to support this claim. Behind his back, people mocked the king, and soon their ridicule turned to contempt. His inability to wage war had undone the victories previously won against the Moors. The king's family life was also a laughingstock. He had been married at a young age to Princess Blanche of Navarre, a beautiful and charming young woman who captivated everyone who saw her. The wedding celebration in Valladolid lasted for several days, but while the guests feasted, Enrique never once touched his wife. And he didn't do so for the entire 13 years of their marriage. Due to this situation, at the insistence of the king, and with the full agreement of the bewildered queen, the marriage between Enrique and Blanca was annulled. Medical professionals examined the young woman and concluded that she was pure and innocent, just as she had been before her wedding. Moreover, they found no flaws in Blanca of Navarre's body that could have repulsed her husband. So what was the issue? The answer came from Rome. Pope Nicholas V, who confirmed the divorce of the Castilian royals, claimed that some sort of witchcraft had prevented Enrique from fulfilling his marital duties. What a convenient explanation. However, the common people of Castile, who were not as eloquent, nicknamed their king the Impotent. So when the king prepared to marry for the second time, it sparked laughter among the populace. Nevertheless, Enrique did marry the Portuguese Infanta, and although it didn't happen on the first attempt, the marriage was consummated. In other words, it actually took place. Soon after, Princess Juana was born. Juana of Portugal, mother of Juana, adored her little princess, but the king remained aloof. The charming girl, a true miracle under the circumstances, immediately fell under suspicion. Was she the king's daughter, or the daughter of the queen's lover? Enemies of Juana of Portugal quickly turned Enrique against her, claiming that Juana's true father was Beltran de la Cueva, a handsome nobleman and a favorite among women. Given that, why wouldn't Juana succumb to his charm? Enraged, Enrique ordered the queen to be sent to the castle of Alarcón, where she was to be watched around the clock. The princess was placed nearby. Soon, the king was delighted to hear that Juana of Portugal had engaged in an illicit affair with one of her guards and was expecting a child. Although the queen insisted she had been violated, the Castilian monarch declared that he had never lived with her as a husband. So Juana was the product of an extramarital affair, just like the twin bastards Juana would soon give birth to. The birth of illegitimate children provided a perfect reason for divorce, and King Enrique achieved this. His marriage to the Portuguese Infanta was annulled. Now, the question of Juana remained unresolved. Was she his daughter or not? The king felt no paternal affection for the child, so he preferred to declare the girl illegitimate. Immediately after this, Enrique the Impotent signed another agreement stating that, in the event of his death, the heir would be his younger brother Alfonso. The new king was far more acceptable to the nobles than Enrique or his questionable daughter. The despised monarch was to be overthrown, and Alfonso was to be seated on the throne. To achieve this plan, troops were assembled, and it was here that the king became truly frightened. One thing was to voluntarily hand over the throne to his brother in some uncertain future. Another was to lose it in a coup, along with his head. Without hesitation, Enrique the Impotent sent assassins to his younger brother. Alfonso died in agony. And once again, the king had no heir, but he could live and reign. Juana of Portugal anxiously followed the news. Enrique had no one to pass the crown to. There were no men left in the family. Would he still insist on Juana's illegitimacy in this situation? However, the queen's worst fears were confirmed. Her ex-husband preferred to name his younger sister, Isabella, as his heir. Over Juana's head, Juana was told no once again. This was so outrageous that Juana demanded an investigation. She turned to her relatives. In Portugal, she wrote to Rome. She loudly proclaimed her innocence and demanded recognition of Juana's rights. A real conflict was brewing, threatening to escalate into armed confrontation, as Juana called for troops from her homeland. The cowardly Enrique backed down. He changed his mind again, and now Juana was called his official heir, the future Queen of Castile. She was finally told yes. One day after lunch, the king felt a terrible pain in his stomach, which could have been a sign of poisoning or a serious illness. Juana was only 12 when her father died in Madrid. His death sparked a war on the peninsula, as two young women claimed their rights to the throne. Princess Juana and her aunt, Isabella. The only forces that could put her on the throne were in Portugal. So, Juana and her mother turned to them for support. To make the alliance more substantial, the princess was married off to a close relative, King Afonso of Portugal, who was 30 years her senior. If they were successful, he could unite the two states, Portugal and Castile. However, Afonso was unlucky. In the decisive Battle of Toro, he was defeated. Consequently, Queen Isabella firmly established herself on the Castilian throne. The marriage to her uncle no longer had any significance. Moreover, the close family tie was not acceptable to Rome. The pontiff annulled the union between Juana and the King of Portugal. The princess lost this crown as well. Since Juana's position remained unclear, and her late father had left conflicting documents about her legitimacy and illegitimacy, Queen Isabella considered her niece a threat. A classic case. The young woman was sent to a convent. However, within the sacred walls, Princess Juana did not take the veil, and after some time, she even settled in a separate castle. On her 20th birthday, Princess Juana received a tempting offer from the young King of Navarre. He invited her to marry him, immediately received her consent, and began preparing for the wedding. However, Juana did not have time to say yes. In Pamplona, King Francis of Navarre was poisoned. Overwhelmed with grief, she spent several days in her chambers, weeping. Juana spent the rest of her life in Lisbon. She died in the year 1530, having seen the rise of her aunt Isabella's reign and the horrific decline of this royal line. The madness of Queen Juana. She witnessed Charles V become emperor and subjugate half of Europe. However, she remained calm and composed. Until the end of her days, she signed all documents as Queen Juana. To herself, she had forever said yes.